Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, along with Owen Hassell. Our weekly tradition continues of discussing some local high school football action. We're officially at week 8 of the regular season. And Owen, we are entering into some big-time Mid-Eastern Conference games this week. Let's get right to it. I think the game of the week and, arguably the most important game of the year so far in the area is this Friday night when Hoggard goes to Charlotte to face West Brunswick. The Trojans are undefeated. The Vikings, a little bit of a down year, of course. They're still undefeated in the conference right now. Whoever wins this game has to feel like, okay, we have all of it right in front of us of winning a conference championship this year.
When has it been a time that West Brunswick's a favorite in this game?
Yeah. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
They haven't beaten Hoggard since 1997.
And there's some stats. That's why Jackson Fuller does what he does. Favorite in this game. Is there a little bit of pressure on top of that because the idea it's still Hoggard, and what does that mean? There's some lingering intangibles here. But yes, West Brunswick should be the better team going into this. Defensive guys that have gotten hurt, maybe they're back for this Friday. You probably have an update on that.
Yeah, so I think of the three defensive starters that got hurt, I know Javion, talking to Coach Hickman last week, is definitely going to play this Friday. They just wanted to take a week off. Luke King had a more serious injury, and then Amarion, Reed, their defensive back, they kind of have to see how he progressed. But Javion McCray, their ECU commit, big defensive tackle, is slated to play this week, and that's huge for West Brunswick. They showed last week against Laney, 20-0 victory. They shut out a team for a third time this year. That defense is more than just Javion McCray, but when he is able to kind of dominate inside, that lets everyone else around him be aggressive, and it makes the entire defense better. So you're right, West Brunswick has to be considered the favorite just on how these two teams have played so far this year. But if I'm Craig Underwood and I'm Hoggard, I kind of have to relish being the underdog in this situation. I mean, when was the last time they were an underdog in any Mid-Eastern Conference game? And hey, they're still the defending conference champs. We've talked about West Brunswick's defense. That Hoggard defense is good too. They've given up 10 or less points in the past 3 weeks. So if the Vikings can hold West Brunswick to 10 or less points again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if Hoggard's defense comes out and plays its A game, there's no reason the Vikings can't win this game.
It is, and that's an interesting point. That how many times are you the defending conference champion? You've won 3 games in a row, and you're under the radar.
Yeah.
Even it doesn't matter who you're playing. 3 games, that's 3 straight victories, and you're under the radar. And yes, defensively, Hoggard has held its own ever since the opening losses with Scotland and Carolina Forest.
Right. And I mentioned this really quickly on the weekly rundown, which if you haven't checked it out, we do those videos every Sunday, which is more than just about football. But when talking about football, I said, if you're Hoggard this year, you just have to realize there probably aren't going to be many blowout victories like you've had in the past. And that's okay. It's a different team this year. At the end of the game, when there's zeros on the scoreboard, if you have more points than the other team, that's all that matters in a race towards a conference championship. Can Hoggard win a game like this 10-7, 13-10? Absolutely. I do think West Brunswick, though, with the guys that they've got on offense, DeAndre Clarida and Trey Bell, they're going to be able to make a couple big plays, but they have to find the end zone. And it's going to be, I think, whichever team can field position is going to be a huge battle too, because if Hoggard can get some short fields, if West Brunswick can get some short fields on offense, that'll be big. I'm really excited. I think Charlotte's it should be a fun environment. I hope it's a fun environment. I mean, your team's 5-0 for the first time since 1997. If you can't come out and support now, when are you going to at West Brunswick?
Yeah, it's going to be this is a game too for Hoggard to obviously really figure itself out in terms of the Mid-Eastern Conference. Understood before the year Scotland was going to be a heck of a tough matchup. Carolina Forest is going to be, even if Hoggard had the tools it had last year. Now you are now deep in the conference play.
Right.
And West Brunswick, not the team to beat, but right there for good reason. This is not a fluke, people. West Brunswick is 5-0, and they deserve to be 5-0. Yeah. There is a lot on the line. I think this is great for Hoggard, even looking at next year. I'm going that far ahead because you got a lot of young players, and they are learning a lot on the job, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And you get out of this season maybe with just 3-4 losses, still have a winning record. You got a lot of those guys back next year. Hoggard's going to be in the mix again and again.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a hallmark of how the program is doing well, that if you had 3 or 4 losses, that's a down year.
Yeah.
a lot of programs would love to have just that.
Absolutely. Last thing I think we'll say about this in terms of, for Hoggard, they have to coming into the season, like you mentioned, they knew they might take some punches to the face against Scotland County and Carolina Forest. And once they got past that game, I think, they weren't going to say it publicly, but all eyes were kind of on this West Brunswick game. They figured we should be able to beat Purnell Sweat, we should be able to beat South Brunswick, we should be able to beat Ashley. Let's get healthy, get this offense where we want it to be, the defense where we want it to be going into this game against West Brunswick. Is the offense where it wants to be? Probably not, but it's showing maybe a little improvement from game to game. They scored 2 touchdowns last week against Ashley. They found some new weapons running the football. This is the game that Hoggard, once they got past those first 2 losses, has kind of circled and say we need to be playing our best by the time we go to West Brunswick.
And field position again. If you can force a turnover too early in the game to kind of silence the crowd a little bit, and you get the ball, the 15-20 of West Brunswick, you can get a quick score that way. Well, how much of a difference is that going to make for Hoggard to score, or anyone scoring early, of course, in the game, but Hoggard especially, because as you saw against Ashley, that game scoreless.
Right, in the second half.
In the second half, where a lot of people, and you tried to peer pressure me one more time about Hoggard Ashley, and I said, no, I think the Screaming Eagles could hang in there, and
they were right there.
And Ashley certainly did.
Yeah, and Ashley got down to the Hoggard 8-yard line for the first drive of the third quarter and couldn't punch it in. So, and I just want to say, if I'll have a story on both defensive lines for Hoggard and West Brunswick coming out later this week. I think those are the 2 biggest strengths on both of those great defenses. So be sure to check StarNewsVarsity.com for that story. Let's jump to the rest of these games we're going to try and tackle kind of quickly. New Hanover at Laney Friday night. The Wildcats, you said we have to consider West Brunswick contenders, maybe not the favorites. I think we can say what New Hanover at this point is the favorite. It's no given they win the MEC, but the performance that they put up against Topsail, I was really impressed. I mean, holding that offense to 7 points. We figured New Hanover was going to have could run the football well against Topsail, but that defense completely limited Cody Wallace and Gavin Ellis and company.
It's fun to see how this team is really taking on the personality of Dylan Dimmick, the head coach of New Hanover. I think you see what I'm saying in between the lines.
Yeah,
you were at the game, so I don't want to get into
the field goal to get to 51. But I mean, Coach Dimmick was not happy with how Topsail treated their kneel and kicked the field goal to, they were in field goal range. Owen Daffer made it, and he had a kind of a rough night kicking field goal, so get some confidence there. Yeah, and I think the Wildcats, they just have so many offensive weapons, and Mackay Stanley, I think he's averaging almost over 8 yards per rush. I mean, that guy can take it to the house on any play. Buccaneers going to try and bounce back. They're 1-4 after getting a really momentum. We thought it could be a momentum starting win over Topsail. Shutout against West Brunswick, but they played with Wildcats close the past 2 years. That game could definitely be close.
It's again, like you said, the last couple of years, Laney's defense, one of the best in the Mideast in the last couple of years, despite the records. Last year was right there with Hoggard. Should have beaten Hoggard. Has been right there with New Hanover the past couple of years. There's just something that's held Laney back. Could that be the same situation Friday? We'll have to see.
Yeah, the offense will need to. I think New Hanover is going to score almost 20 points in every game they play. Can Laney get to that number? We'll see. South Brunswick at Topsail, a pair of teams that are 0-2 in the league, but have came in with a lot of momentum entering MEC play. The Pirates are going to be looking to kind of get that offense rolling. The Cougars, It's unfortunately similar to what it was last year, where they entered 3-1. They had a lot of confidence, and then a couple things just haven't gone their way in the Mideastern so far. And they almost beat Hoggard on the road. They come home, and North Brunswick doesn't score a single offensive touchdown, and they still can't beat the Scorpions. So both of those teams desperate for a win to kind of get their conference play rolling.
It's a gut check time for both teams.
Yeah.
I think South Brunswick as much as anybody, because Topsail the last 2 years has been used to getting winning records, starting to reach the playoffs, that have taken that step or two forward. South Brunswick so desperately wants to get to that. Coach Rocky Lewis and company. The secondary of South Brunswick is really going to be key here.
Yeah.
Can it can it at least keep Topsail enough in check
Right.
in the secondary to have a chance at this one?
Yeah, that'll be a big one. And for Topsail, if they want to make the playoffs again, this is a must-win game because they've still got games against West Brunswick and Hoggard coming down later in the season. And then finally, Ashley at North Brunswick. Ashley doesn't have a win yet this year. Played Hoggard extremely close. They couldn't score, but that defense held Hoggard to 14 points. North Brunswick 4-2. Coach Brian Davis, every time I talk to him, he talks about new guys getting injured and just how depleted they've been all year, but how impressed he's been with his team's fight. Because despite those injuries, this is the best season North Brunswick's had in a very long time. They could get to 5-2 and 2-1 in the league and be over 500 in the Mid-Eastern Conference. I'm gonna have to check when the last time that happened was. I mean, hats off to the Scorpions this season for with limited depth and some injuries, they're still putting together a good season.
I'd say hats off to about every coach in the Mid-Eastern Conference right now for what they're doing
in
different ways and with different expectations that every team is going to have. Wilson Helms with Ashley, that team could have already folded weeks ago and said, the heck with it. Let's just go out there and play.
Right, and clearly they didn't.
No, they're right there. They've been right there in the last couple of games. North Brunswick, you just mentioned it with Coach Davis. Coach Rocky Lewis with South Brunswick has got some younger players and a quarterback that I think is kind of the future for them that could be really good. Topsail, of course, is still doing Topsail things as far as non-conference early winning games and still being a threat. Laney with that win against Topsail and defense is pretty good. There's a little bit you can pick out of every team where you say, okay, the coaching is in the right direction with every team. And even Hoggard with Craig Underwood to win 3 in a row now and to just keep those Scotland and Carolina Forest games in the past.
Yeah.
There's a little something that you can like about, and obviously West Brunswick with
Right.
Brett Hibben, who might be Coach of the Year in the Mid-Eastern so far. So it's fun to see that every coach is really putting their mark on these teams, and you're seeing some successes, even if it doesn't always show in the win-loss record.
I will say for all 8 of these teams, you don't look at a loss and say, "Ooh, that's a bad loss." Laney is 1-4. They played those 4 losses came to really good teams. Topsail's 2 losses. Laney we consider that an upset, I guess, but Laney's a big 4A school that always has weapons and athletes. And last year that game came down to a game-winning field goal. This year it came down to a 4th and goal play. So, yeah, I think all of these teams have to be, sure, some of them aren't thrilled with where they are, but when you look at, they're not underachieving this year by any means. And then I just want to touch on a couple games. Wallis Hill opens its East Central Conference play at Goldsboro. Finally, week 8. That's a conference with just about 6 teams, I think. So the Bulldogs coming off that loss to Wake Forest. Now it's go time in the 2A, getting to play against some competition that they'll see in the playoffs. I expect Wallis Hill to go on a pretty dominant run here to close the season. And then Whiteville at West Bladen. The Wolfpack just ran all over Fairmont last week. They look like favorites in the Three Rivers Conference. Their game against Red Springs a little bit later this season will probably be essentially the Three Rivers Conference championship. So it should be. I'll be down at Charlotte this week covering that game. We're not sure if we're gonna be able to make it to any other games, but as always, Twitter at Star News Varsity, Facebook.com/Star News Varsity. Like we've said this a couple times, but it's a fun season where we're going into these games and any result wouldn't really be that surprising because the conference as a whole, it feels a little closer than it normally is. And the headliner is the Vikings at the Trojans on the new turf field, and West Brunswick trying to beat Hoggard for the first time since 1997. So follow along all week for coverage, and on Friday night we'll have plenty of updates for you. Thank you guys so much again for watching as always, and everybody have a great week.